But in light of their predictions, I think that they were most probably right. Because the next things that were said about the Branch Davidians, when all of the previous lies would not fly, you see, Americans found themselves on February the 28th watching their television sets in utter disbelief as an agency of the federal government assaulted a church in Texas with guns blazing, helicopters firing down through the roof. And then we watched in utter amazement as these people bravely took up arms in defense of themselves and their church. And literally kicked the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms ass right in front of us. And we saw them with hands in the air, backing away from that church after 4 of their number had been killed and many others wounded. In the initial assault, when they piled out of their cattle cars and began firing at the Branch Davidians through the walls, while 3 helicopters came over the horizon and began firing down through the roof, a very, very brave David Koresh, in the face of all of this fire, opened the front door of the church and stuck his body half out as a target, waved his arms, and pleaded for them to stop, saying, "There's women and children in here. Stop. Don't shoot. Stop. Let's talk about this. Please. Don't do this. There are women and children in here." They shot David Koresh in the stomach. He was shot in the wrist. One of his friends standing close to him, behind him in the doorway, was shot and killed. The Branch Davidians immediately slammed the door and grabbed their weapons and defended themselves and their women and their children and their church and their rights, as all Americans have done when attacked in the history of this country. And when all of the accusations that were made against them didn't fly, the American people didn't believe it, because they said the warrant was only for David Koresh, and they could have got him anytime they wanted to, because he frequently went to town alone. One time, when the local sheriff was concerned that the Branch Davidians had some illegal weapons because some accusations had been made, the sheriff called David Koresh, and he said he went right into town to see the sheriff. Went directly to the sheriff's office. The sheriff and some deputies came out and inspected their weapons and took a whole bunch of weapons back with them to be inspected, and found that they had no illegal weapons whatsoever of any kind, and returned them all to the Branch Davidians. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms knew this. The same organizations that had made the accusations about the weapons against the Branch Davidians then began to make accusations that they were child abusers and child molesters. The Child Welfare Bureau of the state of Texas sent professional, competent investigators to check this out. All of the records that we have been able to obtain, and we've been able to obtain all of them, ladies and gentlemen, say very clearly that there was no substantiation to any of the accusations or allegations whatsoever. In fact, the investigators said that they had never seen a group of happier, more well-adjusted, or more well-educated children anywhere. The children showed no signs of psychosis, no signs of abuse. They were happy and smiling and played well, and responded well, and they were well disciplined. And they were well versed in the Bible. And then all of a sudden we began to hear accusations that David Koresh was sleeping with all of the women. That's really strange, ladies and gentlemen, because I think in every city in this entire country, every small town, every burg, every borough, every four corners, there's somebody sleeping with all the women. But nobody is assaulting them with guns drawn, firing, and helicopters firing down through their roofs, are burning them to death. So we know that wasn't it, because nobody really cares about that. That's their business. And if that's why they went after David Koresh, how come the Mormon Church is still in operation? If that's the reason to kill a group of people, to kill a church, kill a religion, then the Mormon Church would have been destroyed many, many years ago. And there are many towns in Utah and in the states around Utah where they are still practicing polygamy, ladies and gentlemen. And who cares? They have to answer to God for their actions, not me. And if they're not hurting the person or property of anybody else in this world, it is none of my business, and it is none of your business. If they are consenting adults, they are acting within the law, whether it violates your moral principles or not. And the United States government, in the person of the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, had no business whatsoever hurting any of those people for any of the reasons that they gave. If it were true that they had illegal weapons, it was a matter for the local sheriff and the local police department, whoever had jurisdiction. And since they're just outside the city limits, it would have been the sheriff. The sheriff had a good rapport with David Koresh, had already examined all of the weapons at Mount Carmel and found them all to be legal and lawful and not in violation of any law of anybody. The Child Welfare Services had investigated the allegations of child abuse and child molestation and found them groundless and that it was not true. No substantiation whatsoever, and even said that they had never seen a more well-adjusted, well-educated, well-behaved bunch of children in their entire history. That speaks well for the Branch Davidians, very well, considering the children of those who persecuted and murdered them are just a bunch of uneducated, ignorant, illiterate, spoiled brats in most cases. Not all cases, but most. Now this Waco massacre was not the first time that this had occurred, ladies and gentlemen. It had occurred several times before, once in another religious community in a plain state, which was resolved by the people surrendering. It all occurred on April the 19th. And the leader went to jail. And I'm not going to get too deeply into that because nobody was killed, nobody was shot, nobody was anything. Thank God. There was the Randy Weaver episode. Randy Weaver and his wife, Vicky, his son, and 3 daughters, one of whom was only a small baby. In fact, wasn't even born when the events leading up to this occurred. You see, Randy Weaver was approached by a BATF informant who sold him a shotgun that was 1/4 of an inch under the legal length of the barrel. I don't know anybody that can look at the barrel of a shotgun and tell within 1/4 of an inch whether it's a legal length or not. And if it was 1/4 of an inch under, it would probably look like it was right about the right size. And unless you suspected or could see saw marks or something on that barrel, you would never think to even measure it, unless it obviously looked short. So Randy Weaver purchased that shotgun, and later another BATF informant coaxed Randy into selling it to him, knowing full well that it was 1/4 of an inch too short of the legal limit, and that he had obtained it from them in the first place. These people are scum, sucking, lying, deceiving pigs. They are, in fact, Nazi jackbooted thugs, just exactly as they have been labeled by others many months ago. So they arrested Randy Weaver and took him into jail and told him that if he would agree to be a spy on his neighbors, they would reduce the charge to a minor charge and put him on parole for a certain period of time, which means he would have to cooperate, or they could just get him for violating his parole, which means that they could say he did anything that they wanted him to have done and put him in jail. Randy Weaver said no, he wasn't going to spy on anybody. He wasn't a spy, he wasn't a rat, he wasn't an informant, and wasn't going to be. They told him if he did not, that they were going to put him away forever. He refused. So he knew if he came in to try to defend himself on the court date, that there was nothing in the world that was going to save him. So he took his family. He did what I would have done and what many other people would have done. He left. He got out of that state. He went to Idaho. He found a little isolated cabin up in the mountains, and he placed his family in that cabin, and except for a very few very necessary trips to town, they stayed there, all the while in fear for their lives, afraid of these Nazi jackbooted thugs who had vowed that they were going to put him away forever if he didn't cooperate with them. And then, on one fateful day, they caught up with him. They shot his son in the back and killed him. They shot his dog, his son's dog. A despicable worm, lower than a worm. He's an evil, terrible, dirty person named Lon Horiuchi, a sniper for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Can you believe this? They have snipers to use against the American people now. Set himself up within 100 feet of the cabin. And when Randy and his friend came out to go to the birthing shed where they had placed the body of his son to prepare him for burial, they opened up on Randy Weaver and his buddy. wounded them both. As they ran back to get into the cabin, Vicki Weaver was standing in the doorway holding her baby to her breast, unarmed, not wanted for anything, had never committed any crimes in her life. Lon Horiuchi, this despicable worm, this FBI sniper. Can you imagine someone who'd really set out to become a cold-blooded assassin, because that's what a sniper is? If his country was not at war and it was not necessary for him to be something like that. Can you imagine the mental condition of someone who actually set out to, wanted to be, volunteered for it and trained for the fateful day when he would shoot and kill an unarmed, unwanted mother holding her baby to her breast in the doorway of her cabin for nothing more, ladies and gentlemen, than 1/4 of an inch of a barrel of a shotgun that was never used in the commission of any crime, that was sold to Randy Weaver by the BATF and purchased back from him by the BATF just so they could entrap him and threaten him and force him and coerce him into turning into an informant on his friends and neighbors. And you ask me why I don't like these people? If I've got to explain it to you, then there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your mind. And then, ladies and gentlemen, just like they've always done in their history, they had filled a big rubber bladder full of fuel in a clearing and were attaching it to a helicopter so they could drop this bladder of fuel onto the roof of the cabin, where it would then break, drenching the home in fuel, where they would then set it on fire and burn them all alive, including the baby, the 2 young daughters, Randy and his friend, and of course his son was already dead, and his wife lay dead in a giant pool of blood in their cabin. They literally had to pry the baby from her arms, for she truly had a death grip on that baby. And the last thing that she probably consciously did was to make sure that when she fell, that she was holding her baby tightly so that the baby would not fall and injure itself. And she made sure that she fell on her back so that the baby would be cushioned by her body, and then she died. And you want to know what I don't like about these people? I want to know where they get them. Where do they find such scum? What sewers do they crawl through to recruit these people from? How do they justify to themselves, and I doubt if they do, I believe sincerely that they are selected from psychological examinations which tell those who are hiring them that they are true sociopaths and have no conscience whatsoever, will follow any orders that they are given, and will not even blink an eye. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, these are excellent candidates for mental hospitals. That was another April the 19th, ladies and gentlemen. And then there was the Oklahoma City bombing, which was carried out by the same people for the same reasons to serve the same agenda. It was the American Reichstag. The Oklahoma City Murrah Federal Building was blown up by the agents of international socialism. It was the American Reichstag It was the instrument by which the anti-terrorism bill that would never have had a chance of passing in America in a million years to be realized, to be passed, to signal the death knell of the Bill of Rights and the freedoms of the American people. It establishes the police state. Recently, the director of FEMA was made a full cabinet member. The anti-terrorism bill provides for the merging of law enforcement into a national police force. It calls for a domestic anti-terrorism unit. It calls for phone taps on a massive scale. And many, many other things, ladies and gentlemen, that you have not the slightest idea of how badly it's going to affect your liberties. It is not meant to identify and cull out terrorists, domestic terrorists of any kind, for all of those laws have been on the books for many years. There is nothing that a terrorist can do that is not illegal, ladies and gentlemen. He can't even talk about what he's going to do with someone else without it being illegal, because it constitutes then conspiracy. No, this anti-terrorism bill and other legislation that still is going to be passed in the future of a more draconian nature will be aimed at the political opponents of socialism and the one-world totalitarian socialist state. In other words, you and I. Marx said peace is the absence of opposition to socialism, and that's really what this is all about. Why do you think patriots are being demonized in this country where patriotism has been revered since its inception? Why do you think the militias are being vilified when the militias are the entire and sole reason for the existence of this country? It is the militias that have fought all the battles on this nation's soil, ladies and gentlemen. The militias fought the Revolutionary War that created this country. The militias fought the Indian Wars. The militias, ladies and gentlemen, fought against the British in 1812. The militias, ladies and gentlemen, made up the contingents of both the Northern and the Southern armies that fought the Civil War. A modern-day militia in a southern state, ladies and gentlemen, routed out years of corruption and restored an honest vote to the people of that city. But not until the militia engaged them in a terrible firefight and beat them unmercifully, and held them at bay until the National Guard could arrive on the scene and arrest the criminals who had held this town in a reign of terror for many years and had rigged every ballot of every election that had ever been held. Why do you think they want to disarm the American people, ladies and gentlemen? Disarming law-abiding citizens does not prevent crime, and criminals do not obey the law. And in states where it is known that everyone carries a gun, there is very little, if any, crime. Many law enforcement officers have been saved by citizens with guns. Every year, thousands of citizens are saved from death, injury, or the theft of their property simply because they have a gun, and most of those guns are not fired, just shown, just held up in view. In Florida now, that they have the most liberal concealed carry law of the nation, criminals do not assault Floridians. They do not hijack cars that have Florida license plates, because they know that the citizens of Florida are now armed. They look for rental cars and out-of-state plates and tourists from other countries because they don't want to get shot. Why do you think these socialist, airheaded idiots have to constantly and consistently and blatantly lie every time they open their mouths? It's because they can't win any other way. I was sickened to death knowing the reason for the Oklahoma Mira federal building bombing and who actually perpetrated it and how. And believe me, we know that now, and it will all be disclosed. Knowing all of that, and knowing that the symbol of the perpetrators is one red rose, to watch them laugh and mock the citizens and the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing as they all trooped in for their memorial service after that bombing, handing them each a red rose, and watching Hillary and William Clinton sitting there holding that one red rose up to their chin and under their nose and displaying it so that every time a photograph was taken, it was taken with them holding that one red rose. And when he made his speech during that memorial service to talk about those who had sacrificed, for that's what it was, the spring human sacrifice of the old mystery religion of Babylon and ancient Rome and all of the pagan religions of the history of the world to ensure the fruitfulness of their endeavor and bless their new world order. Socialism, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most terrible, most despicable afflictions, plagues, if you will, that has ever descended upon mankind. It robs humanity of everything good. It robs the individual of his self-worth. It takes away determination and opportunity. It makes everyone a victim and the state the great benefactor and protector of all of the slaves beneath it. Indeed, the government under socialism becomes the only important thing in the world. And anyone or any number of people can be sacrificed for the safety and security of the state. It amazes me that people buy into it. It amazes me that people don't understand that the only answer to the world's problems is a true inner spirituality. A disaffection with all of the things that we think we need. For if you think you need security, you will become the slave of the one who provides that security. If you think you must have steak and lobster every night, you become a slave to the means of obtaining that steak and lobster every night. If you think you cannot live without a great big comfortable home with running water and flushing toilets and comfortable couches and the big boob tube in your living room, then you are a slave to all that it takes to obtain the money to keep that house and keep that house up and pay the taxes on that house. And if you cannot support yourself or take care of yourself, if you don't understand the meaning of freedom, then you must exist on the benevolence of Big Brother, then you are a slave to Big Brother, and whatever Big Brother demands of you, you must accomplish. So for all those who have died on April the 19th, and all of the previous years, and this April the 19th is not over yet, ladies and gentlemen, do not stop praying. And because we've all caught on to it and what it means and what it brings and who's bringing it about, it is not inconceivable that a terrible catastrophe could still happen within the next several days. So maintain your prayer vigil and maintain your watchfulness and your personal security. If you are a known patriot or militia member, stay away from law enforcement or military and out of situations that could cause you to become embroiled in any kind of incident. And remember, the next time it could and maybe will be you. Good night.